Learn English with Sanju. Hello everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you a beautiful and emotional story. But before we begin, let me ask you one question. Have you ever waited for someone who never came? Sometimes, life doesn't answer our questions immediately. Sometimes, the answers arrive years later. Today's story is about a forgotten letter, so, sit back, relax, and let's begin. In a quiet little town lived a young boy named Daniel. Daniel was only 10 years old. He lived with his mother. His father had left home when Daniel was just 5 years old. No phone calls, no birthday wishes, no letters. Nothing. Every Father's Day at school, children proudly talked about their fathers. But Daniel always stayed silent. Whenever someone asked, "Where is your dad?" he simply smiled and said, "He's working far away." But deep inside, he didn't know the real answer. Every evening, Daniel sat near the window. Whenever the mailman rode his bicycle down the street, Daniel's eyes filled with hope. Maybe today there would finally be a letter from his father. But every day, the mailman passed by without stopping. Years went by. Daniel slowly stopped waiting. He convinced himself that his father had forgotten him. At the age of 25, Daniel had become a school teacher. He loved helping children, especially those who grew up without a father. One rainy afternoon, as he returned home from school, he noticed an old postman standing outside his house. The postman looked nervous. In his hand was a faded yellow envelope. The envelope looked very old. The postman walked toward Daniel and quietly said, "I'm sorry, this letter should have reached you 15 years ago." Daniel looked at the envelope. His hand started shaking. In the top corner, he saw the sender's name. His father. Daniel couldn't believe his eyes. For 15 years, this letter had never reached him. He slowly opened it, without knowing that the words inside would completely change everything he believed about his father. Daniel stood frozen. The rain continued falling around him, but he didn't even notice. His eyes remained fixed on the old envelope. His hands were shaking. For 15 years, he had dreamed of receiving something from his father. And now, it was finally in his hands. He slowly unfolded the letter. The paper had turned yellow with age. The handwriting was slightly faded. He took a deep breath, and began to read. "Dear Daniel. If you're reading this letter, it means I've finally found the courage to write to you. First of all, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed. I'm sorry for every tear you cried because of me. I never left because I stopped loving you." Daniel's heart started beating faster. He continued reading. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors told me I might not live for very long. I didn't want you to grow up watching your father become weaker every day. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I walked away. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much. Tears slowly rolled down Daniel's face. For years, he had believed his father had abandoned him. But now, everything he believed was falling apart. The letter continued. Every single birthday, I bought you a gift. Every Christmas, I stood across the street just to see you smile. I wanted to run toward you, but I couldn't. I wanted you to remember me as a strong father, not as a man slowly losing his life. Daniel covered his mouth. He couldn't stop crying. He whispered, "Dad." The letter wasn't over. There was one final paragraph. "I hope one day you'll forgive me, and if it doesn't, just remember one thing. Not a single day passed without me loving you." The letter ended. Daniel sat down on the front steps of his house. His entire world had changed in just a few minutes. For 15 years, he looked at the old postman. He asked, where is my father now? The old postman lowered his head. Then quietly replied, there's something you still don't know. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked at the old postman with tears in his eyes. Please, he whispered. Tell me where my father is. The old postman took a deep breath. Then, with a heavy heart, he said, your father passed away, 14 years ago. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. The world around him became silent. He had spent 15 years believing his father had abandoned him. But the truth was even more painful. His father had tried to reach him, and the letter had never arrived. The old postman continued, a mistake at the post office placed this letter in an old storage box. We found it only a few days ago during renovations. Daniel looked down at the letter. He held it tightly against his chest. It felt as if he had finally heard his father's voice, but it was too late to answer. The next morning, Daniel asked the postman to take him to his father's grave. They drove to a quiet cemetery on the edge of the town. Daniel found a simple gravestone. On it was written, a loving father. Forever remembered. Daniel slowly knelt down. For several minutes, he couldn't say a single word. Then, with tears in his eyes, he whispered, Dad. I'm sorry. I thought you left because you didn't love me. Now I know, you loved me more than I ever imagined. Then he smiled through his tears. I forgive you. And I hope, wherever you are, you can forgive me too. As Daniel stood up, he noticed something behind the gravestone. It was a small metal box. The caretaker explained, your father asked us to keep this here, in case you ever came. Daniel slowly opened the box. Inside was a tiny toy car, the same toy he had wanted as a child. There was also one final note. No matter how much time passes, you'll always be my little boy. Daniel broke down in tears. Years later, whenever one of his students felt lonely, Daniel would tell them, never assume you know someone's whole story. Sometimes the truth is hidden in places you never think to look. That letter changed his life forever. Not because it erased the pain, but because it replaced anger with understanding. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe for more emotional English stories every week. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next story.